They told her she was nothing. For 17 years, every pack, every elder, every wolf who looked at her said the same thing. You have no shift. You have no beast. You have no place among us. And she believed them. She left every territory they threw her out of. She hid the one thing inside her that could change everything. She made herself smaller, quieter, invisible. And then one night, in a flooded ravine, in the dark, in the freezing cold, she saw 3 small wolves drowning. And something in her said, not today. What she did next was not supposed to be possible. What came out of her hands was not supposed to exist. And the most powerful Alpha King in the Northern Territories watched every single second of it. He did not run. He did not call her a monster. He knelt in the mud, the king on his knees in the dirt, and he said 4 words that shattered everything she had ever been told about herself. But that is not even the twist. The twist comes 3 days later, when his enemies send something dark and deliberate into his room in the middle of the night. When she wakes up at 2 in the morning and feels his life going out like a candle being smothered by an invisible hand. When she has to make a choice that no one has ever survived making. Give everything, every reserve, every wall, every carefully protected piece of herself she has been hoarding since she was 7 years old. All of it. Or watch the man who saw her, truly saw her, for the first time in her entire life, die on the floor of a dark room while his enemies wait in the treeline. What she does in that room will make you stop breathing. What comes out of her in that moment is not just power. It is 17 years of being told you are nothing, transformed into the single most devastating act of love this story has ever seen. And the ending. The last 3 lines of this story. I need you to hear the last 3 lines. Because when I wrote them, I sat back and I did not speak for a full minute. Because sometimes a story finds the exact words that a feeling has been waiting for its entire life. And these are those words. Do not skip this one. You have been waiting for a story like this without knowing you were waiting. This is the one. The pups were going to drown. Mara saw them from the ridge. 3 small bodies tumbling through the flooded ravine, their terrified cries swallowed by the roar of the storm. She did not think. Ran. The freezing mud sucked at her boots as she threw herself down the slope, her hands grabbing at roots and jagged rock to slow her descent. The smell hit her first. Glacial water, wet fur, blood from where the smallest pup had already struck a stone. She did not have the right to be here. This was Alpha King Kalen's territory, and she was a nullborn, a wolf with no shift, no beast, no pack, the lowest creature in their world. But the pups were drowning, and she was the only one who had seen them fall. She plunged into the ravine. The cold was not cold. It was a weapon, a blade driving straight through her ribs and squeezing her lungs flat. Her fingers found fur. Then a second scruff. Then the smallest one, limp and blue-lipped, barely conscious beneath the churning black water. She held all 3 against her chest and fought the current with everything in her bones. Her boots found the muddy bank. She collapsed. For a long moment there was only the rain and the sound of the river and 3 small wolves coughing river water onto her chest. She pressed them against her skin, beneath her torn jacket, sharing the only warmth she had. It was not enough. She knew it was not enough. So she did the thing she had spent 17 years hiding. She opened the place inside her chest that no one was supposed to see. The warmth that poured out of her was not fire. It was something older. It moved through her palms and into the pups like sunlight moving through amber, slow and golden and impossibly deep. The smallest pup's lips turned pink. His shivering stopped. His tiny chest rose and fell in a long, steady breath, and he made a small sound of comfort, like a child reaching for a blanket. Mara pressed her face into his wet fur and wept silently because she was so cold and so tired and so terrified of what she had just done. She did not hear the footsteps. She did not hear the silence that fell over the treeline, the sudden stillness of a predator going perfectly, devastatingly still. The voice that came from above her was so low it was barely sound at all. What are you doing to my children? She looked up. Alpha King Kalen stood at the top of the ravine bank, his black hair plastered flat by the rain, his gold eyes burning through the dark like two struck matches. He was enormous, not just in height but in presence, in the way the storm itself seemed to bend around him, as if the weather had learned to show deference. He was also already mid-shift. The bones of his jaw cracked. His shoulders swelled beneath his drenched shirt. The sound of his body reshaping was like green wood splitting, wet and violent and deeply wrong to hear up close. Mara did not run. She could not run with 3 pups pressed against her skin. They fell, she said, and her voice was steadier than she had any right to expect. I pulled them out. The alpha's eyes dropped to his children. Something moved across his face. Something seismic, something that rearranged the architecture of his expression from fury into a state she could not name. The smallest pup lifted his head and licked Mara's jaw. Kalen's shift stopped. The cracking of bones went silent. He descended the bank in 4 long strides and crouched in the mud before her, close enough that she could smell him. Cedar smoke, rain, iron, and beneath it all something warm like hearthstone and old amber. His enormous hand reached out. She flinched. He did not touch her. He touched his son's face, gently, with a tenderness that looked almost wrong on a man built like a weapon. He was not breathing when I last felt him through the bond, Kalen said quietly. He was not speaking to her yet. He was speaking to himself. He was not breathing, and now he is. His gold eyes lifted to hers. You are a nullborn. It was not a question. It was the opening of an accusation. Yes, she said. Then explain to me, he said, and the quietness of his voice was more frightening than a shout, what I just watched you do. The rain hammered the earth between them. Mara made the only choice she had left. She told him the truth. I do not shift, she said. I never have. But I carry something, I have always carried it. I can feel where life is dim, and I can push warmth into it. I can reach into the space where something is almost gone and pull it back toward the surface. She met his eyes and did not look away. The elders of my old pack called it an abomination. They said a wolf who could not shift but could touch life itself was something unnatural, something that should be put down before it learned what it could do. The silence stretched. Kalen studied her face with the focused, unnerving attention of a man who had spent decades reading threats. They were afraid of you, he said. Yes. Because you can give life back. Yes. He was quiet for a long moment. A muscle in his jaw tightened. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, dropped lower, become rougher, as if the words were being dragged up from somewhere very deep. My Luna left this morning, he said. She has been gone for 6 hours. She did not take the children because she did not want the children. She wanted the title and the territory and the crown, and when she realized those things required her to also love what was mine, she left them at the river's edge in the rain and walked away. Mara's chest ached for him, but she said nothing, because this was not a moment that wanted softness from a stranger. My son was dying, Kalen said. His voice did not break, but it bent. My son was dying, and a nullborn pulled him out of a river with her bare hands and poured life back into him with something the elders of her own pack wanted to destroy her for. He exhaled slowly. The rain was easing. In the growing quiet, Mara became aware of how close he was, how the warmth that came off his body was volcanic, effortless, the natural heat of a dominant wolf who burned brighter than other people. She became aware that her power was still open. She had not closed it. And it was responding to him, not reaching toward him the way it reached toward the injured and the dying, but straining toward him the way a compass needle strains toward north. Pull. Certain. The feeling was so foreign and so absolute that it knocked the breath from her body. She watched the moment it happened to him too. She watched his nostrils flare. She watched his pupils expand until the gold of his irises was nearly gone. She watched him go very, very still. The stillness of a man standing at the edge of something enormous, looking down. That is not possible, he said. His voice was wrecked. I know, she whispered. You are a nullborn. I know. The bond does not reach nullborns. I know. He stared at her. His chest was rising and falling faster than it should have been for a man who had not moved. What is your name? He asked. Mara. He said her name once, quietly, like he was testing the weight of it, like he was checking whether it could hold what he was about to put on it. The smallest pup made a soft, sleepy sound and pressed his nose harder into the hollow of her throat. Kaelin looked at his son. He looked at her. And the alpha king of the most powerful pack in the Northern Territories knelt in the freezing mud and bowed his head. You saved what I could not, he said. You carried a power that should have destroyed you, and instead you used it to save my bloodline. He raised his eyes to hers. The gold was absolute now. No amber, no warmth. Pure, blazing, terrible certainty. The bond one feel toward you is real, he said. I do not understand it. I do not have the language for what you are. But I know what the pull means, and I know what it means when my youngest son breathes because of you. He did not look away. I am declaring you, he said. Before the moon and before my pack and before whatever power lives inside you that the world was foolish enough to call a weakness, I am declaring you my true mate. The rain stopped. The silence that fell over the ravine was complete and vast and full of something that felt like the world rearranging itself into a new shape. Mara looked at the Alpha King kneeling in the mud before her. She looked at the 3 pups pressed warm and breathing against her skin. She felt the pull in her chest, the compass needle, the certainty, the terrifying and enormous truth of it. She had spent 17 years being told she was nothing. She had spent 17 years hiding the only thing she was. And now the most powerful alpha alive was kneeling in the cold earth and telling her that the thing she had been running from was the same thing that had led her here. To this ravine, to these children, to this moment. She tipped her chin up. You should know, she said quietly, that I am not afraid of what I carry anymore. His gaze burned. Good, said the Alpha King. Because neither am I. She saved the Alpha King's pups while his Luna abandoned them. Now he declares she's his true mate. Part 2. What the darkness finds. The declaration hung in the air between them like smoke. Mara did not move. She was not sure she was capable of moving. Not because of the cold that had settled deep into her marrow, not because of the 3 warm pups pressed against her chest, but because the weight of what Kaelin had just said had pinned her to the earth as surely as a stone. He was watching her. Not the way the men of her old pack had watched her, with that particular mixture of suspicion and contempt that she had learned to read in the set of a jaw, the angle of a shoulder. He was watching her the way a man watches a horizon when he realizes the light is changing. Like something in him had shifted and there was no shifting it back. You are shivering, he said. His voice had changed again. The declarative thunder of the Alpha King had receded, and what remained was quieter, lower, more careful. Almost human. I am fine, Mara said. It was an obvious lie. Her teeth were close to chattering. Her soaked jacket clung to her ribs like a second skin of ice, and the warmth she had poured into his children had taken something from her. It always took something from her, left her feeling hollowed and translucent, like a lantern with most of its oil burned away. Kaelin rose from the mud in a single, fluid motion. He stripped his outer jacket off in one movement and held it out to her. It was enormous. Dark canvas and fleece lining, still warm from his body in the way that only dominant wolves ran warm, like something metabolic and volcanic lived just beneath the skin. Mara stared at it. I am not asking, he said. I am telling you that you are cold and I have something that will fix that, and the only thing preventing you from taking it is stubbornness. You do not know me well enough to call me stubborn, she said. I know you jumped into a flooded ravine for children that were not yours, he said. I think I know you well enough. She took the jacket. She told herself it was purely practical. She told herself the way it smelled, cedar, iron, hearthstone, had nothing to do with the pull in her chest and everything to do with the fact that she was hypothermic and not thinking clearly. She was not entirely certain she believed herself. She transferred the pups one at a time to his arms, and she watched the way he held them, large hands cradling small bodies with a tenderness that seemed to cost him nothing, as natural and unconscious as breathing. The largest pup, a boy with his father's dark hair rendered in miniature, wrapped his arms around Kaelin's neck and pressed his face there and exhaled a sound of absolute relief and belonging. Something cracked open in Mara's chest. She looked away. "We need to move," Kaelin said. "The storm will return before dawn. The pack house is 40 minutes east." He paused. "Can you walk?" "Yes," she said, and meant it, and immediately proved it by standing on legs that were steadier than she deserved. They walked. The forest at night in the Northern Territories was not the forest of stories. It was not romantic or mystical or softly lit by dappled moonlight filtering through cathedral branches. It was dark in the way that darkness is when it is complete, a darkness that pressed against the eyes, that had texture and weight. The pine trees rose on either side of the narrow path like walls, their roots erupting from the earth in gnarled, arthritic formations, and the ground between them was a mosaic of mud and pine needles and standing water that caught the weak beam of Kaelin's phone torch and threw it back in fragments. The smell of the forest at this hour was different than the smell of it in daylight. It was earthier, more animal, the deep composting smell of wet bark and decaying leaves, and beneath it the sharp mineral scent of the storm's aftermath, ozone and cold rock and the distant iron smell of the river still churning in its banks. Mara walked half a step behind Kaelin. She did not know why she had defaulted to that position. It was instinctive, the nullborn's position, the position of someone who had learned that taking up space in a dominant wolf's peripheral vision was an act that required permission. She caught herself doing it and moved deliberately to his side. He glanced at her. He said nothing, but something in his expression shifted, a fractional softening, a recognition of what the movement had cost her. "Tell me about your old pack," he said. It was not a gentle question. It was not cruel either. It was direct, and she had the sense that it was his version of gentleness. That directness, for him, was a form of respect. "There is not much to tell," she said. "There is everything to tell," he replied. "You are a woman with a gift that your own people tried to destroy you for. That is not nothing to tell. That is the whole story." She was quiet for a moment. The mud sucked at her boots with every step, and the pups had fallen asleep against Kaelin's chest. 3 small warm weights that he carried without apparent effort. "The Ashvale pack," she said finally. "In the southern lowlands. My mother was an Omega who died when I was 4. No one knew who my father was, or if they knew, they did not tell me." "And your gift," he said. "When did it begin?" "It did not begin," she said. "It was always there. The first time I understood what it was, I was 7. A packmate's dog had been struck by a car at the edge of the territory. It was bleeding internally. There was nothing anyone could do." He paused. The memory was tactile, the rough concrete of the roadside under her knees, the dog's labored breathing, the smell of hot blood and exhaust. "I put my hands on it," she said. "And I found the place where it was coming apart, and I pushed warmth into it, and the bleeding stopped." "The dog survived," Kaelin said. "For 8 more years," she said. "And everyone who saw it decided it was a coincidence. Until they could not anymore. Until I was 14 and the pack elder's son was thrown from a horse and his skull was fractured and I was the only one there," she said. "I kept him alive for 20 minutes until the healers came. They found me with my hands on his head and his vitals stable and no medical explanation for why." She felt the memory of what came after in her body more than in her mind. The specific cold of being looked at by people who had known you your whole life and deciding in a single moment that you were something other than what they had believed. "They gave me a week to leave," she said. "And you have been moving since." "For 3 years," she said. "Always moving." Kaelin was quiet for a long moment. The path widened slightly and the trees thinned enough that the cloud-diffused light of the moon reached them, pale and watery, turning everything silver and shadow. "You will not move again," he said. It came out with the absolute, unthinking certainty of a man who had never had a decision he made go unimplemented. Mara looked at him. "You cannot simply declare things," she said. "I have been doing it for 15 years, he said. "It works more often than you would expect." She almost laughed. She did not quite, but the almost was real, and she felt it in her chest where the hollow tiredness lived, a small warmth that had nothing to do with her gift. The pack house materialized from the trees like something that had grown there. It was vast, 3 stories of dark timber and pale stone, its windows lit warm amber against the black sky, a structure that managed to be simultaneously a fortress and a home. The scent of it reached Mara before the building itself fully resolved. Wood smoke, cooked meat, the layered complex smell of many wolves living in close proximity, earth and musk and something almost electrical, the scent of pack bond given physical form. She had not smelled pack in 3 years. Her chest did something complicated. The front doors opened before they reached them. A woman appeared on the threshold, mid-40s, silver-streaked hair pulled back severely, wearing the expression of someone who had been managing crises for so long that alarm had been replaced by a focused, operational calm. Her eyes went immediately to the pups, then to Mara, then to the jacket Mara was wearing, Kaylin's jacket, and something moved through her expression too quickly for Mara to fully read it. "Healer Soren," Kaylin said. "The pups need to be checked." They went into the ravine. The youngest stopped breathing. Healer Soren moved without hesitation, crossing the threshold and taking the smallest pup from Kaylin's arms with practiced hands, her fingers already moving over the child's skull, his ribs checking. "He is warm," she said. There was something puzzled in her voice. "He is stable. His color is—" She stopped. She looked at the pup. She looked at Mara. "Who performed the intervention?" she asked. The silence lasted exactly 1 second. "She did," Kaylin said. Soren looked at Mara with the particular attention of a healer. Thorough, unsentimental, cataloging. "You are not a ranked wolf," Soren said. "No," Mara said. And yet, Mara agreed. Soren looked at Kaylin. Something passed between them. The compressed communication of 2 people who had worked together for a long time and had developed a language made mostly of glances. "Take the other 2 inside," Soren said to Kaylin. "I will examine all 3 in the east wing. You," she looked at Mara, "you will come with me. You look like you have given more than you should have." It was not a question. It was not an invitation. It was a healer recognizing depletion in a body the way a mechanic recognizes a car running on fumes. Factual, immediate, requiring action. Mara followed. The east wing of the pack house was quieter than the main hall. The floors were worn timber, pale and smooth, and the walls held shelves of dried herbs whose names Mara did not know but whose smells she recognized. Yarrow, wolfsbane in small controlled amounts, the sweet musty scent of dried valerian. Soren settled the pups into a wide bed, tucked them in with the efficient tenderness of long practice, and then turned to Mara and pointed at a chair beside the window. "Sit," she said. Mara sat. Soren examined her with quiet hands. Pulse point at the wrist, the inside of the elbow, pressing 2 fingers gently against Mara's sternum in a way that made Mara's breath catch because the woman was feeling for something other than a heartbeat. "You use your core," Soren said quietly. "Yes. And each time you do, it takes from there." "Yes." Soren removed her hands. She looked at Mara with an expression that was not quite awe and not quite alarm but lived somewhere between the 2. "I have read about gifts like yours," she said. "In the oldest texts. Pre-shift records from before the pack systems were formalized. They called practitioners like you Veilweavers." The word landed on Mara like a hand on her shoulder. Unexpected, grounding. She had never had a name for it. She had only ever had the thing itself, and then the fear of it. "The texts described Veilweavers as rare," Soren continued. "One in several generations. And they described them as—" She paused, choosing her words with the care of someone navigating around something delicate, "as deeply threatening to established power structures. Because a wolf who can restore life does not fit neatly into hierarchies built on the threat of death." Mara understood immediately. "You are telling me that alpha politics depend on the finality of injury," she said. "I am telling you that the knowledge of what you are will not stay contained in this house," Soren said. "Kaylin has enemies. Every powerful alpha does. And his enemies have ears in places you would not expect." She looked at Mara steadily. "I am not saying this to frighten you. I am saying this because you deserve to understand the territory you have just entered. Mara looked at the sleeping pups. The smallest one had his thumb near his mouth, not quite touching it, a gesture poised between infancy and the age he was growing into. I was not planning to enter any territory, Mara said. I know, Soren said. But you did. And the Alpha has declared you. She said it without judgment, without the loaded quality that Mara had braced for. Simply as fact. And now, Soren said, we manage the consequences. The consequences arrived faster than Mara had expected. She was given a room in the east wing. Small, clean, pine-paneled, with a window that looked out over the dark treeline and a bed with blankets thick enough to feel like permission to stop bracing. She slept. She did not know for how long. She woke to the sound of voices in the corridor outside her door. Low, urgent, carrying the specific compressed quality of people who were trying not to be heard and not entirely succeeding. She lay still. She identified Kaelin's voice first. The low register of it, the controlled precision. A second voice, male, younger, clipped and rapid. His beta, she thought. She had not met him yet, but she had heard Kaelin use the title in passing. 3 scouts from the Vraken border reported movement, the beta was saying. Not a patrol shift. Coordinated movement. The direction is inward. They know she is here, Kaelin said. It was not a question. The timing is difficult to explain otherwise, the beta said. The ravine is only a quarter mile from the Vraken borderline. If they had eyes on the territory, which we have suspected for months, then they saw the girl. They saw what she did. Mara's heart was moving very quickly. She sat up slowly, making no sound, and pressed her back against the headboard and looked at the closed door. What is their interest? Kaelin said. A Veilweaver, the beta said. Kaelin, their alpha has been declining for a year. We have known this. His pack healer cannot identify the cause. If they have just watched a girl pull a dying child back from the edge with her bare hands. They want her, Kaelin said. The flatness of his voice was absolute. They want to use her, the beta said. Which is different. Another pause. When Kaelin spoke again. His voice had the quality of a door being closed and locked. Increase the border patrols to rotating 6-hour shifts. Full sentinels on the East Ridge. And tell no one in the main hall what she is. Not yet. The pack will ask questions, the beta said. Let them ask, Kaelin said. They will not get answers until I decide it is safe to give them. Footsteps retreating. Then silence. Then a knock on her door. She had known it was coming. Come in, she said. Kaelin opened the door. He had changed from his wet clothes. Dark trousers, a simple dark shirt, sleeves pushed to the elbows in a way that seemed habitual rather than deliberate. He looked at her sitting upright in the bed with her hands folded in her lap and he said, You heard? Yes, she said. How much? Enough. He crossed the room and sat in the chair beside the window, the same chair Soren had directed her to hours before. The chair was too small for him technically, but he occupied it with the unself-conscious ease of a man who had never thought about whether he fit in a space because he always had. The Vraken pack, he said. Tell me what you know about them. Very little, she said. I passed south of their territory 8 months ago. I know they are large. I know their alpha, Koroth, built his power on military alliance rather than birth rank. I know they are considered, she paused, ruthless. By people who use that word carefully. Kaelin nodded. All of that is accurate, he said. And their alpha is dying. I heard that too. And they believe you can heal him. She looked at him steadily. Can you? He asked. It was a direct question. She had known it would come eventually. And she had known she would need an answer. She pulled her knees up and wrapped her arms around them. A self-protective gesture she noticed herself making and did not stop. I do not know, she said. The gift does not have clean edges. What I can do depends on the nature of what is failing. If it is something mechanical, a wound, internal bleeding, a failing organ, I can sometimes reach it. If it is something deeper, she paused, looking for the right language. If it is poison, Or if someone has deliberately unraveled something in the life thread rather than broken it. He stopped. Something had moved in Kalen's expression. Sharpening. Deliberately unraveled, he repeated. What does that mean to you? It means, she said slowly, that some wounds are not accidents. Some declining vital forces are not natural deterioration. Some things that look like illness from the outside are. She thought of the way darkness in a life force felt different from the way dimness did, the difference between a candle burning down and a candle being smothered, extinguished by intention. Kalen was very still. Koroth is not ill, he said. It was not quite a statement and not quite a question. I do not know, she said. I have never touched him. Have no way to know. But if he were, if someone were slowly extinguishing his life rather than allowing it to dim naturally, then what his healers are seeing would look exactly like a mysterious decline. The room was quiet. Outside the window the tree lean was beginning to resolve from black into the deep blue-gray of very early morning. The first suggestion of dawn, not yet light but a lessening of dark. If someone is doing that to him, Mara continued carefully, the question is not who would want Koroth dead. It is who is positioned to do it through him, without him knowing. Kalen stood. The movement was abrupt, not agitated but decisive, the movement of a man whose mind had reached a conclusion and was now already 2 steps ahead of the moment. He went to the window. He stood with his back to her, looking at the tree lean. The line of his shoulders was rigid. His beta, he said. Not to her. To himself. To the pre-dawn darkness outside. Drevian has been managing Korotha's communications for 9 months. Controlling his access to his own pack leadership. We have been watching it and calling it efficient administration. He turned. His gold eyes in the early light were extraordinary. The specific amber of old honey held up to a flame, complex and layered and burning with an intelligence that was uncomfortable to look at directly. You cannot go to Vrakan territory, he said. I was not planning to, she said. I am aware, he said. But the reason I am saying it now is that Drevian will come here. When Koroth dies. And I believe now that he will be made to die, and soon, Drevian will step into the alpha position. And the first thing a new alpha consolidating power does is eliminate the variables he cannot control. He looked at her. You are a variable no one has a framework for, he said. I know, she said. I have always been. Something moved across his face. Not pity, she would have rejected pity. Something closer to recognition. The specific recognition of someone who understood what it meant to carry something enormous and have no one around you capable of holding it with you. I spent 4 years after my father died holding this pack together with my bare hands, he said. I was 19. I had 3 elders who believed I was too young and a border dispute to the north, and a mate bond that would not come and a pack of 300 wolves who needed to believe I was certain even in the moments when I was not. He said it without self-pity. He said it the way a geologist describes rock formations. As fact, as history, as the explanation for why the landscape looks the way it does now. I know what it is, he said. To carry something that the people around you cannot see. To have your strength be the thing that most frightens them. Mara looked at him for a long moment. The hollow tiredness in her chest was still there. But it was warmer now, the way a cold room becomes warmer when a second person enters it. Not because anything structural has changed, but because heat is a thing that exists between bodies, not in isolation. What do we do? She asked. The "we" came out before she had decided to say it. She felt it leave her mouth and noted the way it landed. The way Kalen's chin came up slightly, the almost imperceptible shift in the set of his shoulders. As if the word had done something to him. We do what is in front of us, he said. Today that means the pups are checked and fed and brought back to some version of normal. Today, it means you eat something because Soren will be furious with me if I do not ensure that. And Soren's fury is one of the few things in this territory I have learned to genuinely fear. Mara almost laughed again. This time it was slightly closer to actual laughter than before. And after today, she asked. He looked at her with those gold eyes and the dawn was growing now, true and pale, touching the edges of things and making them real. After today, he said, we deal with whatever comes through the tree lean. He moved toward the door. At the threshold he stopped. He did not turn fully, but he angled his head slightly. A listening posture or a thinking one. "The name Soren used," he said. "Veilweaver. Does it mean something to you? Does it change anything, having a name for it?" Mara considered the question honestly. She thought about 17 years of carrying something that had no name. The way nameless things grow larger in the dark. The way they sprawl into every space because there are no edges to contain them. She thought about the word itself, Veilweaver, and the way it had landed not like a label but like a key. "Yes," she said. "Good," he said. And he left. The morning assembled itself around her slowly. She found the attached bathroom and stood under hot water until the cold that had nested in her bones finally, reluctantly, departed. She dressed in clothes that had been left outside her door. Simple, clean, the right size in a way that suggested either extraordinary organizational efficiency or the specific attention of someone who had looked at her and thought carefully about what she would need. She suspected the latter. She suspected Soren. She went downstairs. The pack house at morning was a different organism than the pack house at night. It moved and breathed and generated noise. The sound of a kitchen producing something that smelled of bacon and wood smoke and coffee, the sound of children's feet on upper floors, voices in the main hall overlapping and braiding together in the comfortable way of people who had eaten breakfast together 10,000 times. Mara stopped at the bottom of the stairs. She was an outsider. She was a nullborn in the house of an alpha king who had declared her his mate in a muddy ravine at midnight, and not a single wolf in this building knew what she was yet, and the moment they found out, the calculus of every interaction she had here would change. She was used to this feeling. She was not used to feeling it while also feeling the pull in her chest that pointed, with the reliability of a compass, toward wherever in this building Kaelin currently was. She followed it. Not because she had decided to. Because the body has its own decisions, and sometimes they move faster than the mind that houses them. She found him in a room off the main hall, half office, half war room, with a long table covered in maps and a window that faced the eastern ridge. He was standing at the window. His beta was present, a younger man, sharp-featured, with watchful dark eyes that moved to Mara the moment she appeared in the doorway and stayed there for a long measuring moment. "Beta Rowan," Kaelin said without turning from the window. "This is Mara. She is under my protection. She is to be treated accordingly." Rowan looked at her. "Accordingly," he repeated, and something in the word had a question inside it. "Accordingly," Kaelin said, and the word in his mouth had no question whatsoever. Rowan looked at Mara for another moment. Then he gave a single nod. Not warm, not cold. The nod of a man making a professional decision that he had not yet made a personal one about. "There is movement on the eastern ridge," he said, addressing Kaelin but looking at the map on the table. 3 figures. They are on our side of the borderline. Mara moved to the table before she was aware she was moving. She looked at the map. She did not understand all of its markings, but she understood the geography. The ridge, the ravine, the borderline marked in red. 3 marks in pencil, east of the ravine. "They are not scouts," she said. Both men looked at her. She was not certain why she was certain. But the certainty was absolute. "Scouts move to observe and return," she said. "If they crossed the border and are staying, they are not gathering information. They are positioning." Rowan looked at Kaelin. Kaelin was looking at Mara. "For what?" Rowan said. Mara looked at the map. She thought about what Kaelin had said about Drevian. About a new alpha consolidating power. About eliminating variables. "For retrieval," she said. The word fell into the room with the weight of a stone into still water. "They are not watching the territory," she said. "They are watching me." She had known, from the moment she saw the 3 figures on the map, that it would come to this. Not this room. Not this night specifically. But this moment. The moment where hiding was no longer a choice available to her. Where the thing she had spent 17 years running from would plant its feet and refuse to move and demand that she face it fully. That moment had always been coming. She understood now that it had been coming since she was 7 years old with her hands on a dying dog on a roadside. the warmth flowing out of her like it had somewhere to be. She had just not known where it was going. Now she did. It happened on the third night. The Vraken wolves did not come loud. They did not announce themselves with howls or the crash of bodies through underbrush. They came the way deep water comes, silently spreading, finding every low place and filling it before anyone realized the level had risen. Mara woke at 2 in the morning with a pull in her chest, screaming. Not the compass needle pull that pointed toward Kaelin. Something else. Something wrong. She was out of bed before she was fully awake, her feet on the cold floor, her hands already reaching. Not physically, but in the way she reached when she was feeling for life forces in the dark, the internal sense that had no name until 3 nights ago, when Soren had given it one. It reached. And what she found stopped her breath entirely. Kaelin's life force was dimming. Not the natural dimming of sleep. Not the dim of exhaustion or injury. The smothering. The deliberate, intentional extinguishing of something that should have burned for decades more. Ran. The corridor was dark, and she did not stop to find a light. She knew where he was. The pull guided her with a precision that had nothing to do with memory or navigation, and everything to do with the bond that had snapped into place between them in a flooded ravine 3 nights ago. She found the door to his room. It was open. The window was open. The curtain moved in the night air like something breathing. Kaelin was on the floor. He had made it from the bed to the floor. She could see the evidence of the struggle in the tangled bedding, the overturned lamp, the way his body was positioned as if he had been trying to reach the door and had not made it. He was on his side. His eyes were open. His chest was moving, but barely. The shallow, irregular movement of something being slowly compressed from the inside. Beside him, pressed against the baseboard as if it had been placed there deliberately, was a small bundle of black material, twisted cord and something dark and organic within it, tied in a configuration that Mara did not recognize consciously but that her gift recognized immediately. It recoiled from it. The way a hand recoils from a flame. This was the source. Not poison. Not illness. Intention given physical form. Someone had placed this object in his room and it was actively, methodically pulling the thread of his life loose, the way a single wrong thread pulled from a tapestry can cause the whole structure to unravel. She heard boots on the stairs. Rowan burst into the doorway, 2 sentinels behind him, and stopped at the sight of Kaelin on the floor. For one fraction of a second she saw the beta's composure crack, saw the man beneath the rank, the one who had known Kaelin for 15 years, the one for whom this was not a political crisis but a personal one. Then the composure sealed itself back up. "What happened?" he said, crossing the room. "Do not touch him," Mara said sharply. Rowan stopped. He looked at her with those watchful dark eyes. "Do not touch him yet," she said, and her voice was different now. Not the quiet, careful voice of a girl accustomed to making herself small. Something else. Something that came from the same place as the warmth. "There is an object by the baseboard," she said. "It needs to leave this room before anything else happens. Do not touch it with bare skin. Use the curtain. Get it out of the building." Rowan looked at the object. She watched him register the wrongness of it, the way it seemed to absorb the light around it rather than reflect it, the way the air near it felt thicker. He pulled the curtain rod down in one motion, wrapped the curtain around his arm, and removed the object from the room without touching it directly. The moment it crossed the threshold, Kaelin gasped. A deep, involuntary breath, like a man surfacing from deep water, like a pair of lungs that had been compressed suddenly allowed to expand. But it was not enough. She could feel it was not enough. The unraveling had been happening for long enough that removing the source did not automatically reverse the damage. The thread was still loose. The tapestry was still coming apart. She went to her knees beside him. She put her hands on his chest. And she looked at him, really looked at him, the way she had been carefully not looking at him for 3 days because the full weight of him was something that required bracing for. The sharp angles of his face were slack now in a way they never were when he was conscious. The gold eyes were glassy, unfocused, moving slowly the way eyes move when the mind behind them is not entirely present. He was somewhere between here and the place that came after here. She could feel exactly where he was. She could feel the thread of him, and how much of it had been pulled loose, and how much work it would take to weave it back. And she understood, for the first time with complete clarity, why the elders of her old pack had been afraid. Because this, what she was about to do, was not a small thing. Pushing warmth into a drowning child was a small thing. Campfire. What Kaylin needed was not a campfire. What Kaylin needed was everything she had. Every reserve. Every deep store of warmth she had been building and protecting and carefully rationing for 17 years. He needed all of it. And she understood with the same clarity that giving all of it might leave nothing. She had never tested the edges of herself. She had always stopped before the bottom, always kept something back, always maintained the margin between generous and total. She looked at his face. She thought about the muddy ravine and the way he had knelt in the earth and said her name like it was a thing that could hold weight. She thought about the way he had held his children, that unconscious, effortless tenderness. She thought about gold eyes in pre-dawn light, and the word Veilweaver spoken for the first time like an answer rather than an accusation, and the feel of his jacket around her shoulders smelling of cedar and hearthstone. She thought about the pull in her chest that had always pointed north and had finally, after 17 years of pointing at nothing and no one, found something to point at. She breathed in. She opened herself completely. What happened next? The wolves who witnessed it would spend the rest of their lives trying to describe. Rowan would say, in the years that followed, that the light came from her hands. The sentinels would say it was not exactly light. More like the suggestion of light, the way the air looks just before dawn when darkness has not left but something has changed in the quality of it. Soren, who arrived 3 minutes into it and stood in the doorway without moving until it was over, would say nothing about the light. She would say, the room smelled of pine forests and cold river water and something beneath those things that she had no word for. She would say, it sounded like the moment after a bell is struck, when the ringing is too high for the ear but the body knows it is there. She would say, she watched a girl become something the old texts had described but that no living healer had believed actually existed. What Mara experienced from inside was different from all of these descriptions. From inside it was not light. From inside, it was the sensation of every wall she had ever built around herself dissolving simultaneously. Every careful border. Every strategic withholding. Every morning she had woken up and made the decision to be smaller than she was so that the world around her would feel safer. All of it gone. What was left was the thing underneath. The original thing. The thing she had been born as, before the world taught her to be ashamed of it. She poured it into him. Not carefully. Not in measured doses. She poured the way water pours when a dam gives way. Total, irresistible, the full force of everything behind it released in a single moment of structural surrender. She found the loose thread of him in the dark. She found where the unraveling had started and she took it between her hands. Not her physical hands, but the hands of whatever she truly was, and she began to weave. It was not easy. Nothing she had ever done had prepared her for the scale of this. The damage was deep and deliberate and it fought her. Whatever dark intention had been woven into that object, it had left marks in him that resisted her, that pushed back against the warmth with a cold that was not natural cold. She pushed harder. She felt herself thinning. She felt the reserves she had never touched before beginning to give. She felt the bottom approaching, the edge she had always stopped before reaching, and she did not stop. She thought of the smallest pup's lips turning pink. She thought, not this man. Not this one. She went past the edge. And beyond the edge, in the place she had never been before, she found something extraordinary. Or, not her own reserves, those were nearly gone. Something else. Something that met her in the dark and joined itself to her. And she understood with the clarity of pure instinct that this was the bond. This was what a true mate bond actually was. Not a feeling, not a pull, not a compass needle. A structural connection between two life forces so fundamental that they could share the load. He was unconscious. He did not know he was doing it. But his life force, even diminished and tattered as it was, recognized hers. And it gave. It gave her what she needed to finish. She wove the last of it back into place. She pressed the thread flat. She sealed it. And then she collapsed. She was aware of the floor against her cheek. She was aware of voices. Rowan, Soren, other people she did not know. She was aware of warmth at her back. The specific volcanic warmth of a dominant wolf running hot, and large hands, and the smell of cedar and hearthstone very close. She was aware of a heartbeat. Strong. Steady. Outrageous in its steadiness. She turned her head. Kaelin was lying beside her on the floor, and she understood from the way the room was arranged around them that he had regained consciousness and had moved to her rather than allowing anyone to move him away from her. His gold eyes were clear. Fully, devastatingly clear. None of the glassiness, none of the absence. Just him. Looking at her from a distance of approximately 6 inches with an expression she had never seen on a human face before. She did not have the language for it. It was past gratitude. It was past awe. It occupied a territory that language had not yet developed roads into. You went past the edge, he said. His voice was rough, not damaged, but the roughness of extreme feeling controlled with the last available margin of control. Yes, she said. Her own voice sounded very far away. You almost did not come back. I know. Mara. He said her name the way he had said it in the ravine, like a weight check, like he was testing whether it could hold something. I know, she said again, before he could say whatever he was about to say. I know it was, I know. But you were. She stopped. She pressed her lips together. She was not a person who cried easily. She had not cried easily in a very long time, because crying required a softness that she had not been able to afford. But the reserves that had kept her hard were gone now, poured into him, given freely, and the thing that was left without them was the original thing, the true thing, and the true thing was apparently capable of crying. She felt the tears reach her eyes and did not try to stop them. You were not allowed to die, she said. Not allowed, he repeated, and something moved through his expression that might have been the beginning of a smile if the moment had not been so enormous. That is correct, she said, and the tears were on her face now and she did not wipe them away. You were not allowed. I had decided. He reached out. His thumb moved across her cheek. One slow, certain pass, the gesture of a man who had decided something too and was no longer in any hurry to be anywhere else. Then I suppose, he said quietly, that I owe you my life twice. The pups once, she said. And you once. Yes. Do not make it a third time, she said. I cannot guarantee that kind of output regularly. This time the smile broke through, real and sudden and transforming his face in a way that made him look younger, made him look like the 19-year-old who had held a fractured pack together with bare hands, before the years had built the fortress over him. I will do my best, he said. By morning, the Vraken wolves on the eastern ridge were gone. Rowan reported it at first light. Not fled in haste, but withdrawn deliberately, their tracks showing a measured retreat back across the borderline. Word had reached them somehow. Or perhaps it was simpler than that. Perhaps whatever dark instrument Drevian had sent to do his work had reported its own failure back through whatever channels it used. Perhaps the withdrawal was the acknowledgement that what they had tried had not worked. That the variable they had meant to eliminate had instead demonstrated, in the dark of a bedroom in the northern packhouse, exactly why she could not be eliminated. The Vrakan succession would resolve itself without Mara. Kaelin made certain of that. Made certain through channels and communications and the specific quiet pressure that the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories was capable of applying when the situation required it. Drevian would not ascend. That was not Mara's story to tell, and she was glad of it. Her story was smaller. Her story was a room in the east wing with pine-paneled walls. Her story was 3 small wolves who visited her every morning and climbed onto her bed and demanded stories and showed her their small sharp teeth when they smiled. Her story was Soren, who gave her the old texts, the pre-shift records, the documents that used the word Veilweaver without fear, and watched her read them with the expression of a woman who had been waiting a long time to give someone the right book. Her story was learning to eat breakfast with 300 wolves who had been told, simply and without elaboration, that she was the alpha's declared mate, and watching the room recalibrate around this information with the gradual, tectonic patience of people who trusted their alpha's judgment even when they did not yet have the context for it. Her story was learning to take up space. He did not say anything. He stood beside her and looked at the river and held her hand with the same quality of attention he gave to everything. Complete, unhurried, certain. The pine forest smelled of resin and cold morning air and the faint mineral sharpness of the river. The light through the canopy was the specific pale gold of early morning in late autumn. Thin and clear and honest. She breathed it in. She let it reach the parts of her that had been kept in the dark for 17 years. The original parts, the true parts, the parts that had always known exactly what they were even when every voice around her had insisted otherwise. I used to believe, she said, that the gift was the problem. That if I could have been born without it, everything would have been easier. And now, Kaelin said. She looked at the marks in the mud. She looked at the river. She looked at the man beside her. The man who was alive because she had gone past the edge. The man who had knelt in this mud and given her name the weight of a declaration. The man whose youngest son had turned pink and begun breathing again beneath her hands while the rain hammered the earth and the world rearranged itself into a new shape. Now I understand, she said, that it was never the problem. It was always the answer. I simply had not yet met the question. Kaelin looked at her. The gold eyes. The morning light. The forest breathing around them. He raised her hand and pressed his mouth to her knuckles. Not a courtly gesture, not a performance. Something older and more honest than either of those things. A man acknowledging a debt that could not be repaid and choosing instead to spend the rest of his life being worthy of it. She felt the bond between them settle. Not snap. It had snapped already in this very place, on a stormy night when the world was coming apart at its seams. This was different. This was the bond finding its resting form. Not the sharp electric certainty of first recognition but something deeper, something that lived in the muscle and the marrow, something that would still be there at 90, warm and steady and completely uninterested in performing itself for anyone. She looked at the river. She looked at the marks in the mud that told the story of the night everything changed. And she understood, standing in the pine-scented morning light with her hand in the Alpha Kings and 3 small wolves waiting for her back at the packhouse and a name. Veilweaver. Finally settled around the truest part of her like something that had always belonged there, that the running was over. Not because she had found safety. Safety was never what she had been running toward. She understood now what she had been running toward. She had been running toward the moment when the thing inside her that the world called dangerous would be recognized by the right person in the right light, as the most necessary thing in the world. She had been running toward the question that only she could answer. She had arrived. They would write about her in the years that followed, in the pack records that Soren maintained with a meticulous dedication of someone who understood that some stories must be preserved. They would record her name. They would record what she was and what she had done and what she had given on the night the Alpha King's life hung by a single thread in a dark room while his enemies withdrew into the treeline. They would record the declaration. They would record the ravine and the pups and the flood and the cold and the 3 small lives pressed against the chest of a girl who had no reason to save them except that she was built, at the deepest level, entirely from the refusal to walk away. Future generations would read those records. Future Veilweavers, rare as they were, one in several generations, would find those pages and discover, for the first time, that someone had walked this road before them. That the thing they carried was not a curse. That the ending was not destruction. That somewhere in the Northern Territories, in a pack house made of dark timber and pale stone, a girl who had spent 17 years being told she was nothing had held a dying man's life in her hands and refused, with every reserve she possessed and then some she did not know she had, to let it go. And in doing so had finally, fully, irrevocably, let herself be found. She did not save him because she was his mate. She saved him because she was Mara. And that, in the end, was why he was hers.